The large meeting room was quiet except for the soft hum of air systems. Representatives from 12 different alien species sat around a curved table, their various forms creating strange shadows under the bright lights. At the center of the room, a single chair faced the panel of judges. The chair looked too small for its occupant. Zixthera shifted her weight, trying to find comfort on the human-designed furniture. Her forearms moved restlessly, and the old battle scars on her. Gray skin seemed to pulse with remembered pain. She had been a commander once, leading thousands of Kethmoran soldiers across the galaxy. Now, she was just a witness, here to tell a story that most beings would find hard to believe. The head judge, a tall creature with blue skin and 6 eyes, spoke in the common trade language. State your name and rank for the record. Former battle commander of the 43rd Assault Fleet, Kethmoran Empire. Her voice was steady, but those who knew her species could hear the slight tremor that meant deep emotional stress. You served during the Third Spiral War, specifically in the campaign against the human colony worlds. Yes, tell us what happened. Zixthera took a deep breath, a habit she had learned from watching humans during her captivity. We thought it would be easy. The humans had only been in space for about 200 of their years. They had simple ships, basic weapons, and no real military. Tradition that we could understand. We had conquered 47 worlds before we met them. Every species we fought followed the same patterns. They would resist with their best technology, fight bravely for their honor, then surrender when they realized they could not win. She paused, her large eyes focusing on something far away. The humans were different from the very beginning. The room was silent. Several of the judges leaned forward, interested despite themselves. The Third Spiral War had ended 15 years ago, but its effects still shaped galactic politics. Everyone knew the Kethmoran Empire had been the strongest military force in the galaxy before the war. Everyone also knew that humans had somehow defeated them, but the details had been classified until now. Our intelligence reports said that humans were a typical carbon-based species, Zixthera continued. They lived on one planet, had spread to maybe 30 colonies, and their biggest ships carried fewer than 1,000 soldiers. We brought 50,000 troops to their outer colony at Kepler 4 for 2B. The planet had maybe 8,000 human civilians and a small defense force of perhaps 500 soldiers. She shifted again, her claws clicking against the metal arms. Of the chair, we expected them to surrender immediately. Instead, they did something we had never seen before. They evacuated their cities and disappeared. One of the judges, an insect-like being with translucent wings, made a clicking sound that was the equivalent of clearing its throat, disappeared completely. When our dropships landed in their capital city, we found empty buildings, empty streets, empty everything. No bodies, no signs of fighting, no messages, just ... nothing. It was like the humans had never existed. Zixthara's upper 2 arms gestured while her lower 2 remained still, a sign of deep concentration in her species. Commander Jake Morrison was in charge of the human defense forces. We learned his name later from intercepted communications. At the time, we did not even know there was someone organizing the resistance. What happened next? We began standard occupation procedures. We set up command posts in the major cities, established patrol routes, and started looking for the missing population. We assumed they were hiding in the mountains or underground facilities. Our scanners could detect large groups of humans, so we thought it would be simple to find them. The head judge made a note on his datapad, but you did not find them. Found some of them, small groups, never more than 20 individuals at a time. But every time we found them, something strange would happen. They would not surrender. They would not fight in any way we understood. Instead, they would ... scatter. Zixthera struggled to find the right words. Other species, when cornered, either fight or surrender. Humans do neither. They break apart, like water, and flow around you. Then they come back together somewhere else and attack you from a direction you never expected. She looked directly at the head judge. 3 days after we landed, I was leading a patrol of 50 soldiers through the suburbs of their capital. We had heavy armor, air support, and complete tactical superiority. We encountered a group of 12 humans led by someone we later identified as Sergeant Lisa Park. The memory seemed to cause her physical pain. Her hands clenched into fists. 12 humans against 50 of our best soldiers. Should have captured them in minutes. Instead, they did something that made no sense. They split up and ran in different directions. A retreat, suggested one of the judges. No, not a retreat. They were communicating with each other somehow, coordinating their movements. Within minutes, they were attacking us from 6 different positions simultaneously. They used the sewers, the rooftops, abandoned buildings, even the subway tunnels. They seemed to know exactly where each of us was at all times, but we could not track them. Zixthera's voice grew quieter. They were using the city itself as a weapon. They knew which buildings had weak foundations, which streets had underground gas lines, which intersections had the best cover. They turned their own home into a maze designed to trap us. She paused, collecting her thoughts. The worst part was that they were not trying to kill us. They were trying to confuse us. Every time we thought we had figured out their pattern, they would change it. Every time we adapted to their tactics, they would do something completely different. The insect judge made more clicking sounds. How did this engagement end? It did not end. After 6 hours, we withdrew. 12 humans had fought 50 of our elite soldiers to a standstill using nothing but the terrain and their ability to coordinate in ways we could not understand. We called for reinforcements. Zixthera looked around the room at the assembled judges. That was our first mistake. We thought the problem was that we needed more soldiers. We did not understand that the problem was that we were fighting an enemy who did not follow any rules we knew. What rules? Military rules? Strategic rules? The basic logic of warfare. When you are outnumbered, you retreat or you die. When you are outgunned, you surrender or you die. When your position is hopeless, you make the best deal you can or you die. Humans do not follow these rules. Her voice took on a tone of almost religious awe. They have a different rule. They believe that as long as they can still think, they can still win. It does not matter how bad their situation is. It does not matter how many enemies they face. If they can still think of new ways to fight, they will keep fighting. The head judge leaned back in his chair. You speak as if this is unusual. Many species fight bravely when defending their homes. You do not understand, Zixthera said, her voice growing more intense. Other species fight bravely until the situation becomes hopeless. Then they accept defeat. Humans fight bravely until the situation becomes hopeless. Then they change the situation. She stood up, her forearms gesturing emphatically. They do not accept that any situation is truly hopeless. They look at impossible odds and ask themselves, how can we make this work? They look at certain defeat and ask, what are we not seeing? They look at surrender and ask, what else can we try? The room was completely silent now. Even the air system seemed to have quieted. Within a week, we had brought in 5,000 more soldiers. Within a month, we had 15,000 troops on the planet. The humans never fought us in open battle. They never gave us a target we could destroy. Instead, they just kept asking questions we could not answer. Zixthera sat back down, her energy seeming to drain away. How do you fight an enemy who treats every defeat as a learning experience? How do you conquer people who use their own weaknesses as strengths? How do you defeat someone who sees every impossible situation as just another puzzle to solve? She looked directly at each judge in turn. We spent 2 years trying to answer those questions. By the end, we were not even sure we were fighting a war anymore. We were part of some kind of experiment, and the humans were the scientists. The head judge made a gesture for Zixthera to continue. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering strength to relive painful memories. The real horror began in the 2nd month of occupation, she said. We had learned to expect the unexpected from humans, but we still thought in terms of normal military behavior. We were wrong. Zixthera's 4 hands moved restlessly as she spoke.
Captain Rand Webb
was the first human to show us what they called adaptive improvisation. We had shot down one of our own fighters during a night patrol. It crashed in the Industrial district of the city. Standard procedure was to secure the crash site and recover any useful technology. She paused, her large eyes reflecting the room's lights. Webb got there first. When our recovery team arrived 6 hours later, they found something that should have been impossible. The crash site was gone. Gone? Asked the insect judge. Not just cleaned up. Gone. There was a crater where our fighter had crashed, but it was not from the crash. Webb had somehow turned our own fighter into a bomb. He used chemicals from a nearby factory, parts from destroyed vehicles, and power cells from emergency lighting systems.
Ow.
Our fighter became a weapon powerful enough to destroy a full city block. Zixthora's voice grew quieter. But that was not the strange part. The strange part was that he left instructions. The room fell silent. Several judges leaned forward. Instructions? A simple note written in our language explaining exactly how he had built the bomb. Not just what he had done, but why he had chosen each component, how the chemical reactions worked, and what the expected blast radius would be. He was teaching us. She shook her head slowly. At first, we thought it was psychological warfare. It's humans trying to intimidate us by showing off their technical knowledge. But as the weeks passed, we realized something much more disturbing. Was not trying to scare us. He was trying to educate us. The head judge made another note. Educate you about what? About the difference between human thinking and everyone else's thinking. Most species look at wreckage and see junk. Humans look at wreckage and see raw materials. Most species see obstacles. Humans see opportunities. Most species ask, what do we have? Humans ask, what can we make? Zixthera stood up and began pacing, a habit she had developed during her years of captivity. 3 weeks later, we faced Colonel Amy Brooks at the Battle of New Geneva. We brought 15,000 troops, heavy armor, air support, and orbital bombardment capability. She had 800 humans, no vehicles, and weapons that were 50 years older than ours. Her pacing grew more agitated. We surrounded the city. We had them completely trapped. Our battle computers calculated a 96% probability of victory within 12 hours. Brooks surrendered immediately. The silence in the room was complete. She surrendered. Yes, she contacted us on open frequencies and offered to surrender the entire human population in exchange for safe passage to the next planet. She even provided us with detailed maps of all human positions, supply caches, and defensive installations. Zixthera stopped pacing and faced the judges directly. We should have known it was a trap, but Brooks did not lie. Everything she told us was completely accurate. Every map was correct. Every supply cache was exactly where she said it would be. Every human position was marked precisely. But she had not told us what she was going to do with the city after we occupied it. Brooks and her people had spent 3 weeks preparing New Geneva for our arrival. They had turned the entire city into what they called an environmental weapon. The judges waited for her to continue. Humans do not think about warfare the way other species do. We think about controlling territory, destroying enemy forces, and achieving strategic objectives. Humans think about changing the rules of the game. Zixthera resumed pacing. Brooks did not try to defend New Geneva. She redesigned it. When we moved in to occupy the city, we discovered that every bridge had been weakened to collapse under the weight of our heavy vehicles. Every underground tunnel had been connected to create a single massive flood system. Every tall building had been turned into a carefully balanced avalanche waiting to happen. Her voice took on a tone of grudging respect. She had turned the city into a musical instrument, and she was the conductor. For 3 days, we tried to establish control. Every time we moved troops into position, something would collapse. Every time we set up a command post, the ground would give way. Every time we brought in heavy equipment, the roads would crack apart. Casualties? Asked one of the judges. Almost none. That was the most disturbing part. Brooks was not trying to kill us. She was trying to teach us that we did not really control anything. Every collapsed bridge could have been a deadly trap, but the timing was always perfect to let our soldiers escape. Every flood was precisely calculated to destroy equipment without drowning anyone. Every avalanche was designed to block roads, not bury troops. Zixtara sat back down, her energy seeming to drain away. On the third day, she contacted us again. She offered to stop the environmental attacks in exchange for a single meeting between her and our field commander. What happened at the meeting? Arrived alone, carrying nothing but a datapad and a small bag of local fruit. She sat down with Commander Vextar and ate an apple while explaining exactly how she had redesigned the city. She showed him detailed engineering diagrams, chemical formulas, and timing schedules. Everything we had experienced was planned down to the minute. Zixthara's hands clenched into fists. Then she offered to teach us how to do the same thing. Room erupted in soft murmurs and clicking sounds as the judges reacted to this information. She wanted to share her methods with you? Yes. Brooks explained that humans did not see warfare as a contest between enemies. They saw it as a problem-solving exercise involving multiple parties. She said that if we understood how to use environmental factors as weapons, we might also understand how to use them for peaceful purposes. The head judge leaned forward. What was your commander's response? Dexter ordered her immediate arrest. Brooks finished her apple, thanked him for his time, and walked out of our command post. We never saw her again. How did she escape? She did not escape. She just left. Our sensors showed her walking down the main street through 3 security checkpoints and out the city gates. None of our soldiers tried to stop her. We asked them why. They said they had received orders to let her pass. Zixthora's voice became very quiet. We had not given any such orders. The silence stretched for long minutes. Brooks had somehow accessed our communication systems and inserted fake orders into our command structure. But the orders were not fake. They were exactly what a reasonable commander would have ordered in that situation. She had not hacked our systems. She had understood them better than we did. The insect judge made rapid clicking sounds. How's that possible? Because humans do not just study their enemies' weapons and tactics. They study their enemies' thinking. Brooks had spent weeks observing our command decisions, analyzing our communication patterns, and learning how we made choices. She could predict our orders because she understood our logic better than we did. Zixthara stood up again, her forearms spreading wide in a gesture of helplessness. That was when we realized we were not fighting a normal war. We're fighting people who treated battle like a science experiment. Every engagement was designed to teach them something new about us. Every victory was just data collection for the next encounter. But you still had superior numbers and technology. Yes, we did. The humans helped us understand exactly how meaningless that advantage was. Lieutenant Pete Carson showed us what they called tactical sacrifice. When 50% of our soldiers surrounded his position, he did not try to fight his way out. He did not surrender. He did not call for help. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. He detonated the power core of his own armor and took out a full city block. But before he did it, he broadcast a message explaining his reasoning, his methodology, and his expected results. He turned his own death into a teaching moment. The judges sat in stunned silence. Carson was not trying to kill our soldiers. He was trying to show us that humans were willing to solve problems in ways that other species would never consider. His death was not a desperate last stand. It was a calculated demonstration of human problem-solving methodology. Zixthara looked around the room at the assembled judges. That was when we began to understand that we were not fighting for control of human territory. We were enrolled in a course on advanced military philosophy, and the humans were the professors. Zixthara walked to the window of the hearing room and stared out at the stars. Her forearms hung loosely at her sides, and her breathing had become shallow. The judges waited patiently, understanding that some memories were harder to share than others. 6 months, she said, without turning around. 6 months after we first landed on their world, everything changed. We thought we were starting to understand human tactics. We were wrong again. She returned to her chair but did not sit down. Instead, she stood behind it, gripping the back with her upper arms. The scattered resistance cells that had been operating independently suddenly began working together. Not just coordinating their attacks, but thinking as one mind across entire continents. Master Sergeant Tony Williams was leading a unit that somehow appeared in 3 different locations at exactly the same time. The head judge looked up from his notes. Clones? Holograms? Some kind of technology we were not aware of? No, Williams was definitely one person. We confirmed this through genetic scans, voice analysis, and behavioral patterns. But his team of 30 humans was somehow conducting synchronized operations in New York, Los Angeles, and Denver simultaneously. 3 cities separated by thousands of kilometers, all being hit at exactly the same moment by the same tactical unit. Zixthera began pacing again, her movements more agitated than before. They were attacking supply convoys in New York, while simultaneously destroying communication arrays in Los Angeles and sabotaging command posts in Denver. The timing was perfect down to the second, but more importantly, each attack was designed to support the other two. The convoy attack created a distraction that helped the communication sabotage. The communication sabotage prevented us from coordinating our response to the command post attack. The command post attack eliminated our ability to send reinforcements to defend the convoys. She stopped pacing and faced the judges directly. Williams and his team had turned the entire continent into a single battlefield. They were not fighting 3 separate battles. They were fighting one battle that happened to take place in 3 different locations. The insect judge made clicking sounds. How were they communicating across such distances? We never figured that out, her intercepted transmissions showed. Normal radio chatter, but the content made no sense. They would discuss things like weather patterns, local sports scores, and food recipes. Nothing that sounded like military coordination. Zixthera. His voice took on a tone of frustrated amazement. It took us weeks to realize that everything they said was code. Not encrypted code, but conceptual code. When Williams mentioned that it was raining in New York, he was actually giving orders for the Los Angeles team to begin their infiltration phase. When someone in Denver talked about their grandmother's soup recipe, they were providing tactical updates for the New York convoy. Attack. She sat down heavily, her exhaustion showing. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was when we realized they were using our own weaknesses against us in ways we had never imagined. The head judge leaned forward with interest. Dr. Helen? Stone was a human scientist who had been studying our captured equipment and prisoners. Within weeks, she had developed weapons specifically designed to target Kethmoran physiology. Not just our physical weaknesses, but our psychological and social ones too. Zixthera's hands trembled slightly as she continued. Stone created sonic weapons that broadcast at frequencies that caused severe pain to our hearing organs. But the sounds were not random. They were carefully designed to disrupt our natural pheromone communication system. We could not coordinate our troops because we could not smell each other's status signals. She paused, collecting herself. Then she developed chemical agents that mimicked our territorial marking sense. Our soldiers would arrive at positions that smelled like they were already occupied by friendly forces. We kept trying to set up camp in the same locations, creating massive confusion and overcrowding. The room was silent, except for the soft scratching of the judges taking notes. But Stone was not trying to kill us. She was trying to study us. Every weapon she created was designed to gather more information about how we functioned as a species. She was turning the war into a research project. Zixthera stood up again, her agitation growing. The psychological warfare reached levels that broke our understanding of reality. The humans began leaving us messages, but not threats or demands. They left us observations. What kind of observations? Simple facts about our daily routines. They would leave notes saying things like, "Your patrol changes routes every 47 minutes. Your supply ships always arrive on the 4th day of your week." Or Commander Zektar eats alone when he is worried about battle outcomes. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They never explained how they knew these things. They never made demands based on the information. Just wanted us to know that they were watching us, studying us, understanding us completely. The head judge made a note. Did this affect your troops' morale? It destroyed our troops' morale. We started changing our routines constantly, but the humans always adapted. No matter what we did, they would leave new notes showing they had figured out our new patterns. It felt like a laboratory. Animals being observed by scientists. Zixthera began pacing more rapidly. Then Major Katie Lewis introduced what they called biological warfare volunteers. These were humans who deliberately infected themselves with modified versions of their own diseases. The viruses were harmless to humans but caused severe respiratory problems for our species. She stopped pacing and stared at the judges. Lewis and her volunteers would allow themselves to be captured. They would sit in our detention facilities, coughing and sneezing, spreading their weaponized illnesses throughout our bases. Within days, entire battalions would be too sick to fight. But they were risking their own lives with these infections. That was exactly the point. Lewis explained it in a message she left for us. She said that humans were willing to harm themselves if it meant protecting others. She said that any species that would not make sacrifices for their community would never understand human motivation. Xthera's voice became strained. The breaking point came when we encountered what they called Berserker protocols. Corporal Danny Kim was defending a strategic mountain pass with orders to hold the position at all costs. We sent 200 soldiers to take the pass. Kim was alone. The silence in the room was complete. For 18 hours, Kim held that pass against 200 of our best warriors. He was not just fighting, he was conducting psychological warfare on a level we had never seen. He would scream in different voices, making us think he had reinforcements. He created false radio chatter, broadcasting fake conversations between imaginary units. He used sound effects and recordings to make his single position seem like a full company of defenders. Xthera's hands were shaking now. But the most terrifying thing was that Kim was learning about us during the battle. Every time we tried a new approach, he would adapt his psychological tactics to counter it. He was studying our behavior patterns while fighting for his life, and using that knowledge to become more effective. She sat down and put her head in her hands. After 18 hours, we retreated. One human had defeated 200 Kethmoran soldiers using nothing but psychology and determination. Kim was not superhuman. He was just thinking faster and more creatively than we were. The head judge waited for her to continue. That night, Kim left us a message. He thanked us for the excellent training exercise and provided detailed notes on our tactical approaches, including suggestions for improvement. It turned our attack into a learning experience for both sides. Xthera looked up at the SCE judges with haunted eyes. We realized that we were not fighting soldiers anymore. We were fighting teachers who used warfare as their classroom. Every battle was a lesson. Every defeat was homework. Every victory was a pop quiz. She stood up, slowly, and the most terrifying part was that we were starting to learn. Xthera moved to the center of the room and stood very still. Her forearms hung at her sides, and her breathing had become deep and regular. The judges recognized the posture as one of meditation or prayer in her species. 2 years, she said. Quietly. 2 years of fighting humans, and we still did not understand what was happening to us. We thought we were learning their tactics. We thought we were adapting to their strategies. We were wrong about everything. She opened her eyes and looked directly at the head judge. Commander Alex Morgan was the human who finally showed us the truth. His forces had been fighting us for 24 months, and their tactics had evolved beyond anything in galactic military history. They were no longer fighting in 3 dimensions. They were fighting in 4. The insect judge made questioning clicking sounds. Xthera explained. Morgan's team had learned to use time itself as a weapon. It would coordinate attacks that seemed to violate the basic laws of cause and effect. It would receive reports of supply convoys being destroyed before the convoys had even left their bases. We would get casualties from battles that had not happened yet. She began walking slowly around the room. At first, we thought our communication systems were malfunctioning. Then we realized that Morgan was using time delays, gravitational anomalies, and quantum communication methods to create tactical situations that existed outside of normal time flow. The head judge looked confused. Can you give us a specific example? The Battle of Titan Station? Morgan's forces attacked our orbital supply depot at exactly 3 different times simultaneously. They hit the station in the past, present, and future all at once. Our defensive systems could not respond because they were designed to deal with attacks that followed normal temporal sequences. Xthera stopped walking and faced the judges. But even that was not the most disturbing discovery. The most disturbing Discovery was that Morgan's team was deliberately losing battles in order to gather information about our entire military doctrine. The room fell silent. Every human defeat for the past 2 years had been planned. They had been studying us, learning how we thought, mapping every aspect of our command structure and decision-making processes. Dr. Ashley Parker and her research team had created an artificial intelligence that could predict our military responses with almost perfect accuracy. Her voice took on a tone of grudging admiration. Parker's AI was not like other computer systems. It did not just analyze data, it understood psychology, culture, and emotion. It could predict what our commanders would do in any situation because it understood how Kethmoran minds worked better than we did ourselves. She returned to her chair, but remained standing. The AI's predictions were so complex that only humans could understand and implement them. Parker would give orders that made no sense to us, but the results were always exactly what she had predicted. She was not just fighting us. She was conducting a psychological profile of our entire civilization. Zixtheras's hands began to tremble. They launched what they called the Humanity Protocol. It was not a military operation. It was something much worse. The judges leaned forward with anticipation. Instead of fighting the Kethmoran Empire, the humans began dismantling it. Not with weapons or battles, but by attacking the concept of military hierarchy itself. They were not trying to defeat our army, they were trying to reprogram it. Her voice became strained. Sergeant Matt Kelly led teams that infiltrated our command structures and began giving contradictory orders. But these were not random commands designed to create chaos. They were carefully crafted instructions that exposed the weaknesses in our rigid command system. She sat down heavily. Our military was designed for absolute obedience. Every soldier was trained to follow orders without question. Kelly exploited this by showing us how easily our system could be manipulated. He would give orders that were technically correct but practically impossible, forcing our commanders to make decisions they were not trained to make. The head judge made notes rapidly. Within weeks, our entire command structure was paralyzed. Not because of enemy attacks, but because we had lost confidence in our own decision-making abilities. The humans had shown us that our greatest strength was also our greatest weakness. Zixthora's voice dropped to a whisper. The psychological collapse spread through our forces like a disease. We began questioning every order, doubting every strategy, second-guessing every decision. The humans had not conquered us. They had taught us to conquer ourselves. She stood up and began pacing again. Captain Julie White delivered the final blow. She broadcast a message on all Kethmoran communication frequencies. It was not a demand for surrender. It was not a threat of destruction. It was a complete tactical analysis of every military operation our empire had conducted for the past century. The room was completely silent. White and her team had somehow accessed our military archives, studied our historical battles, and analyzed the psychological profiles of every commanding officer in our fleet. They knew more about our military capabilities than our own generals. Did Zixthera stop pacing and face the judges? The message included detailed psychological profiles of every commander, predictions of how they would respond to various situations, and recommendations for improving our tactical effectiveness. White was not trying to intimidate us. She was trying to help us become better soldiers. Her voice took on a tone of amazement. Then she offered us a choice. We could withdraw from all human worlds and accept her team as military advisors, or we could continue fighting an enemy that understood us better than we understood ourselves. The head judge looked up from his notes. What was your high command's response? Panic. Complete, total panic. Our leaders realized that they were not just fighting a war. They were being psychologically dissected by an enemy that saw military conflict as an opportunity for scientific research. Zixera returned to her chair and sat down. Lieutenant Colonel Roy Davis delivered the final human message. It was broadcasted to every Kethmoran ship, base, and command post simultaneously. The message was simple. We do not want to destroy you. We want you to understand that we can destroy you anytime we choose. The difference is that we choose not to. Make sure you remember that choice. She paused, her hands clenched in her lap. Davis explained that humans had never been trying to win the war in any conventional sense. From the very beginning, their goal had been to create a new type of galactic peace based on mutual understanding rather than mutual destruction. The judges exchanged glances. Every insane tactic, every impossible strategy, every psychological operation had been designed not just to defeat us, but to force us to question our assumptions about warfare and civilization. Zixera's voice became very quiet. The humans had been conducting the largest psychological experiment in galactic history. We were not their enemies. We were their test subjects. And the experiment had been designed to transform us into something better than what we were. She looked around the room at the assembled judges. 3 days after Davis delivered his message, our high command ordered a complete withdrawal from human space. Not because we had been defeated, but because we had been educated. The humans had shown us that there were better ways to resolve conflicts than through military conquest. The head judge made a final note. The war ended not with surrender or victory, but with understanding. The humans had achieved something that no other species in galactic history had accomplished. They had won a war by teaching their enemies how to think differently. Zixera stood up slowly. That was when we realized that we had never been fighting primitive savages. We had been fighting the most advanced military philosophers in the galaxy. They had not just defeated us, they had evolved us. She paused at the door of the hearing room, and the most terrifying part was discovering that they had planned it that way from the very beginning. Zixera walked back to her chair and sat down for the final time. Her forearms were steady now, and her voice had gained a strength that had been missing throughout her testimony. The judges waited patiently, understanding that the most important part of her story was yet to come. 15 years have passed since the war ended, she began. 15 years since the humans showed us that everything we thought we knew about conflict was wrong. The galaxy is a different place now, and we are different beings because of what they taught us. The head judge leaned forward with interest. Tell us about these changes. The Kethmoran Empire no longer exists. Not because it was destroyed, but because it transformed itself into something better. We call ourselves the Kethmoran Cooperative now. Instead of conquering other worlds, we help them solve problems. Instead of imposing our will through force, we work together to find solutions that benefit everyone. Zixera's voice took on a tone of quiet pride. General Karen Scott leads the Human Military Advisory Program that helped us make this transition. She and her team did not come as conquerors or occupiers. They came as teachers. They showed us how to use our military discipline and organizational skills for peaceful purposes. She gestured toward the window that showed the space station where they were meeting. This tribunal exists because humans taught us that conflict resolution could be more complex and effective than simple warfare. Instead of fighting wars to determine who is right, we now use psychological analysis, cultural understanding, and strategic thinking to find solutions that make war unnecessary. The insect judge made clicking sounds of curiosity. How does this process work? The Terran Institute for Impossible Tactics trains military officers from all species to think like humans. Colonel Jim Baker runs the program, teaches us concepts that would have seemed like madness before the war, things like controlled chaos, strategic empathy, tactical creativity. Zixera stood up and began walking slowly around the room. Baker's training programs are unlike anything in galactic history. He takes experienced military commanders and teaches them to question everything they believe about strategy, tactics, and conflict resolution. Students learn to see problems from multiple perspectives simultaneously, to find creative solutions to impossible situations, and to turn their weaknesses into strengths. She paused by the window, looking out at the stars. I graduated from Baker's. Programmed 3 years ago. The experience changed how I think about everything, not just military problems, but all problems. Humans taught me that there is always another way to look at any situation, always another solution to try, always another question to ask. The head judge made notes as she spoke, but the most profound change has been in how we understand the purpose of conflict itself. Zixera returned to the center of the room. Before the war, we thought conflict was about winning and losing. Humans showed us that conflict is about learning and growing. Every disagreement between species is now treated as an opportunity for both sides to understand each other better. Her voice became more animated. When the Zephyrian Trade Federation and the Altarian Mining Consortium had their territorial dispute last year, they did not prepare for war. Instead, they requested human mediators. Captain Rachel Stone and her team spent 6 months with both groups, not to impose a solution, but to help them understand each other's real needs and concerns. She smiled, an expression that was rare for her species. The result was not a treaty or a compromise. It was a completely new way of thinking, about resource allocation that neither side had considered before. The Zephyrians and Altarians ended up becoming research partners instead of competitors. They are now working together to develop mining techniques that benefit both species. The judges exchanged impressed glances. This is the human way of resolving conflict. They do not force people to accept solutions. They help people discover solutions that they never knew existed. Zixthera's voice became more serious. But I want to be clear about something important. The humans did not give us these abilities. They taught us to find these abilities within ourselves. Every species already had the capacity for creative thinking, strategic problem solving, and peaceful conflict resolution. Humans just showed us how to use these capabilities. She sat back down in her chair. The most disturbing thing I learned during my captivity was that humans had been studying galactic civilization for decades before the war began.
They knew exactly what kind of conflicts were developing between different species.
They knew that. Traditional military solutions were creating more problems than they solved. The head judge looked up sharply. Are you saying the war was planned? Not the war itself, but the response to it. When the Kethmoran Empire began expanding aggressively, humans recognized it as an opportunity to demonstrate alternative approaches to conflict resolution. They knew that eventually some species would challenge human colonies. They prepared for that challenge by developing strategies that would transform their enemies into allies. Zixthera's voice became very quiet. Every tactic they used against us was designed with a specific educational purpose. We're not trying to defeat us quickly. They were trying to give us time to learn new ways of thinking. Every battle was a classroom. Every victory was a lesson. Every defeat was homework. She paused, collecting her thoughts. The humans spent 2 years teaching us that intelligence, creativity, and strategic thinking could overcome any technological advantage. But they also taught us that these abilities were meaningless unless they were used to help others rather than harm them. The room was completely silent. That is why I am here today, giving this testimony, not to describe a war, but to explain an education. The humans transformed their enemies into students, their battles into lessons, and their victory into a gift to the entire galaxy. Zixthera stood up for the final time.
Ow.
The gift was the knowledge that every conflict contains the seeds of its own solution. Every problem contains the resources needed to solve it. Every enemy contains the potential to become an ally. You just have to be creative enough to see the possibilities. She walked toward the door, then turned back to face the judges. Humans taught us that the most advanced form of warfare is not fighting at all. It is helping your enemies discover better ways to achieve their goals. It is turning every conflict into a collaboration. It is making war itself obsolete by showing people that there are always better alternatives. The head judge made a final note. What do you think the future holds for galactic civilization? Zixthera smiled again. The humans have established what they call the Galactic Problem-Solving Initiative. Instead of maintaining military forces, species now contribute their best thinkers to teams that address challenges affecting multiple worlds. Climate problems, resource shortages, technological limitations, even philosophical disagreements are all treated as puzzles to be solved cooperatively. She paused at the door. Last month, a joint team of humans, Kethmorans, Zephyrians, and 12 other species, solved the energy crisis affecting the Outer Rim colonies. Not through conquest or resource competition, but through collaborative research and creative engineering. The solution was so elegant and effective that it is now being implemented throughout the galaxy. Her voice took on a tone of wonder. Humans did not just end the concept of war as we knew it. They replaced it with something infinitely more powerful. They gave us the tools to solve any problem, overcome any challenge, and achieve any goal through cooperation instead of conflict. Zixthera opened the door and looked back at the judges one final time. That is the true legacy of human warfare. They taught us that the ultimate victory is not defeating your enemies. It is helping them become the best possible versions of themselves. And in doing so, you become the best possible version of yourself. She stepped into the hallway and paused. Humans turned every enemy into a student, and every student into a teacher. That is how they conquered the galaxy without firing a shot. That is how they won a war, by ending the concept of war itself. The door closed softly behind her, leaving the judges to contemplate the most unusual war crimes testimony in galactic history. A testimony not about crimes, but about the transformation of an entire civilization through the simple act of teaching enemies to think differently.